Cosi fan tutte is actually open to interpretation from its Italian. It could mean all women are like that, everyone does it. There's a number of different sort of ways of interpreting that, but the subtitle is School for Lovers. And I thought that that was a really interesting point of departure, that to actually look at this piece of drama if you were to set it in a school. And that actually ended up solving a lot of issues people have in terms of credibility. There's a number of things that happen in the piece traditionally where people don't recognize lovers who are now dressed as Albanians or what. It's a kind of, there's something kind of preposterous about a lot of the plot, which actually kind of evaporates if you look at it as sort of a class project, that everyone is sort of aware of what they're doing and they're doing it as a game. That doesn't mean that they don't still feel emotions, but the context of it all is, and it feels a lot more fun to reinforce that this is happening amongst teenagers, that the four lovers are teenagers, that that they're surrounded by fellow students, and that it's actually set in a school for lovers, and that's one of the major sort of interpretive innovations, I think, of this production, and I'm really excited to see how that goes over. The issue of misogyny comes up because of, there's a very famous aria in the piece, which one of the young lovers, Guglielmo, sings. And he traditionally would sing that to the audience, which would be absolutely offensive to many female members of the audience. But what we've done here, because we're setting it in a school, is that he's actually singing it to his fellow classmates, his female classmates, and they actually get to react. So, that takes a little bit off the edge, of that side of the piece. So that, and because the two women in this production seem to be aware of the wager, in fact, might be involved with a counter wager with Don Alfonso, it also gives them a lot more agency in terms of their own behavior. They're not just like, really naive. They're quite smart about what's going on. Keeping in mind, of course, that when the opera was written, like these characters were meant to be like 15 years old. So it's really important that we address the youth, and that's what we've done here with not only the casting but also the chorus, the other students. It feels like these are teenagers, and that's, I think, it makes the whole thing feel more real, like in terms of the fluctuations and the shifts and the extremity of different emotions. It sort of feels like there's an adolescent vibe going through it. Part of the idea of being set in a school is that there's a ton of props that are used for these various experiments that they play, and that perhaps this scene of going away to battle is something that's played out as part of one of the experiments, so that these are actual props that the students wear to suggest this flotilla of boats going away. And it's something that's on the one hand kind of ludicrous and funny, but then suddenly becomes, like a lot of the music does, very beautiful, and suddenly you're enchanted by it. The music itself is incredibly challenging for the female voice, and I think there are all sorts of stories that abound about Mozart's relationship with the various singers. I think one of the things that's really important to understand is that at the time he was writing this, his wife Constanza was perhaps having an affair, and it was tearing Mozart apart. It was really, he was bereft by this idea. So a lot of this anguish is in the music. And that's what's amazing about the story for me, is that there are parts, it's a buffa, it's a comedic opera, but there are parts where the music suddenly becomes like so sincere and so honest and so heartrending. And I think it's important to look at Mozart's own life. The Kahlo is very important because that painting is Frida Kahlo's reflection on this amazing shift that happened in her own life. It was painted at the time that she was going through the divorce with Diego Rivera, and she really felt that Rivera was in love with this other version of her, like the peasant version of her. And so this more Europeanized kind of modern version of Frida, which we see on the one side of the painting in the white European dress, is in stark contrast with the peasant Frida. And she's really looking at how she changed. And that's what this opera is ultimately about, is how people can change and what that means in terms of the people who are in love with one version of oneself, and maybe how that shifts and the pain of that. And of course that painting is really about the heartbreak of that. We actually see her two hearts, kind of one torn open, in fact. So it's a lot of the motifs are there from the very beginning of the piece. As you walk into the theater, you're going to see this painting, and you're going to see Don Alfonso, the professor of the school, point to the brooch that she's holding in one hand, and also the scissors. Those are two really important motifs in the piece. The brooch obviously comes from the libretto as well, when the two lovers are looking at the brooches of their beloved. So it feeds in a number of different ways.